Hi, I'm Jim McCartney. I'm a chartered arbitrator and chartered mediator, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what arbitration is. And I think the easiest way to understand arbitration is to simply call it a private court. What it is the parties choose an arbitrator or a number of arbitrators who will be their decision maker to resolve their dispute. If they can't agree on who that might be, they can choose a process by which the arbitrator will be chosen. And if they can't even agree on that process, they can go to the court, who will appoint an arbitrator or panel of arbitrators, or they can go to an organization such as the Alberta Arbitration and Mediation Society, who will appoint an arbitrator for them. The arbitrator, of course, has to be neutral and impartial. Beauty of private court or arbitration is that it is private. There are no public filings, there are no public hearings, and there is no public decision at the end of it. It's simply a dispute resolution mechanism between the parties where someone makes a decision for them, and that outcome is binding but always private. In addition to privacy, there are a number of other advantages to arbitration. One, as I've already mentioned, is you can choose your arbitrator. So you can choose an arbitrator with some subject matter expertise. If this is a construction matter, you might choose an arbitrator who has some construction background knowledge, and so on. You can choose as a party, or indeed influence, if you can't actually choose it, the process that you're going to follow, because after all, there is another party to the dispute and they would have input as well. But you can work with the arbitrator on what that process might be. It might include its inspections of property, or the calling of expert witnesses, or even the retention of an expert witness by the arbitrator to help him or her understand what's being talked about. You could have examinations for discovery just like you would in a formal court proceeding, but again, they're private. You can decide where the hearing is going to be. It usually is in somebody's boardroom. So it's much less formal a setup than a courtroom, and makes parties more comfortable and whatnot as they go along. The result is you get a decision from the arbitrator or arbitrators, and that decision is binding. That's final, and it can be filed as an order of the court and enforced just like an order of a court. Usually you get that decision much more quickly than you do from a judge. So there's a real speed advantage. A lawyer who recently did his first arbitration as counsel before me said that one of the things that he thought was most magnificent about the arbitration process was access to the decision maker. If the parties had a procedural dispute along the way, they could simply send an email to me saying, we need a short hearing to resolve this dispute. We'd organize a conference call a week later, and that part of the dispute would be done. If you were doing that in the court process, it might take you 2, 3, 4 weeks to get that done with formal filings of paper and so on. The rules of evidence are much more relaxed than in a courtroom as well during an arbitration. So hearsay is admissible. Of course, the arbitrator has to weigh that evidence and say, what credibility it has, what weight it ought to be given in the process. In terms of deciding the process, there are some model rules available. The ADR Institute of Canada has model rules that anybody can use and adopt. And indeed, they include an expedited process that shortens the whole time frame so that parties can get from decision to arbitrate to arbitration decision much more quickly than otherwise, and certainly much more quickly than a court proceeding. Arbitrators also have jurisdiction to award costs. So the entire costs of the proceedings could, if the arbitrator so decides, be awarded to one party as opposed to the other or against the other, or they could be split or whatever. The arbitrator has wide jurisdiction. My recommendation is that you include an arbitration clause in all contracts that says, if we have a dispute arising out of this contract, we will arbitrate it. You should go further, in my view, and adopt some rules so that there is a process for how that arbitrator or the arbitrators will be appointed. There's a range of options for where you could use arbitration. In small disputes, you'd want to have a very quick and dirty process where you appoint an arbitrator, you talk to them, say, this is our problem, arbitrator makes a decision. There can be much greater disputes with high money value or long-term implications where you would have a much more formal process. You might have examinations for discovery. You would have a formal document disclosure process and a lengthy hearing. And of course, the evidence would be under oath, as it would in all cases. Arbitration has no jurisdiction, or arbitrators have no jurisdiction, in divorce matters, custody, maintenance, criminal matters, or in wills and estates matters. Those are reserved exclusively for the court. So I would suggest putting an arbitration clause in when you're looking for an arbitrator, look for a chartered arbitrator because they've met minimum standards set by the ADR Institute of Canada and they have insurance.